Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are back in War Thunder looking at the past to developers for December of 2020. We've had a look at the aviation stuff, we've had a look at the ground stuff and the helicopters. Now it's time to tackle the naval forces. Now the naval forces are pretty similar compared to the other areas of the past to developers, where they've basically passed all of the big stuff, including the Yamato, the Iowa, and even stuff such as the Tirpitz. So if I split this into multiple videos, that's basically why, and simple as that really. Anyway, let's get started. So the first one on the list is the USS New Jersey. This is a Iowa-class battleship from the USA, and of course it is America's most decorated battleship ever when it comes to its use. This vehicle has been used in many different wars and many different times over probably the longest period of any battleship when it comes to the world. The New Jersey, or the Big J as it was known, is the second of 4 Iowa-class battleships built during the Second World War, as a response to the Imperial Japanese Navy refusal to disclose any information regarding the construction of the Yamato-class battleships and concerns surrounding the Kongo-class battleships, which used speed to harass convoys. The Navy proposed an equal response. Learning from the mistakes of the previous generations of the North Carolina and South Dakota class battleships, the Navy created the design of the Iowa class in 1938. And with the emergence of aircraft carriers and the need to protect them from surface threats, the concept of fast battleships came into prominence, and ships designed with the speed and the endurance to keep pace with carrier groups and serve as a major deterrent to surface attack. To fulfill this role, the design called for a top speed of 33 knots, from 8 boilers connected to 4 turbines, each turbine to a propeller shaft, and this layout produced a total of 230,000 shaft horsepower. Furthermore, the ship had a greater waterline length to beam ratio, making the ship longer than its predecessors, as well as notably faster. While the Iowa class used the same size rifle diameter of the South Dakota class, which were 406mm cannons, it was stretched in length from 45 calibers to 50 calibers, giving her the distinction of being the largest guns mounted on any US warship to date. The increase in gun length for a higher muzzle velocity, greater range, and greater armor penetration capabilities than preceding guns. After the war, the Navy experimented with a new battleship design containing 18-inch guns. These were the same size as the Yamatos, and found the armor penetration capabilities of the 16-inch to be equivalent. Adding to her powerful arsenal was a comprehensive suite of secondary and anti-aircraft guns. Due to the design emphasis of increased protection against air attacks, the armament systems were supplemented with state-of-the-art radar-based fire control systems as well on top of it. The Iowa-class battleships had the characteristic all-or-nothing armor scheme seen in preceding American battleships, with the thickest armor around the citadel between turrets A and C, or 1 and 3. The outer hull plate was 38mm special treatment steel, and the side armor was 307mm, which was angled at 90 degrees inwards in order to confer greater armor thickness for a little additional weight. This was especially advantageous against shells at longer range, and the weather deck was 38mm of special treatment steel as well. The main armor deck was 152mm, and the splinter deck was 25mm over the magazines and 16mm over machinery spaces. The hull had a triple bottom under the citadel to protect against underbottom explosions, and the armor scheme of the Iowa class was largely the same as the preceding South Dakota class, which offered protection from 406mm guns, firing 1,116 kilo Mark V shells from ranges between 16,000 and 27,000 meters. The USS New Jersey has the most extensive service record of any battleship. It served its country honorably from 1943 to 19 1991, having received 9 battle stars for World War II, 4 for the Korean conflict, 2 for Vietnam, and 3 campaign stars for service off Beirut, Lebanon, and also service in the Persian Gulf prior to Operation Desert Storm. With a total of 19 battle and campaign stars, she has a very extensive service history, which can be covered in so many different areas, right? It literally just covered so much stuff, such as the Marshall Islands operation, the Asiatic Pacific raids, Hollandia operation, the Marianas operation, the West Caroline Islands operation, late Operation Luzon operation, Iwo Jima operation, Okinawa operation, and then also some others such as the Communist China Spring Offensive, the United Nations Summer Fall Offensive, the Third Korean Winter, Korean Summer and Fall as well in 1953. It was part of the Vietnamese Counteroffensive Phase 5 and 6, the TET 1969 Counteroffensive, and also the expedition in Beirut, Lebanon, and also in the Persian Gulf, it's served as well. It definitely was a marvel among ships, and probably the one that everybody is looking forward to when it comes to War Thunder eventually. The Soviets get an offering in the form of the Project 82, but the problem with the Project 82 is that it never fully existed. They hardly even made any of it before the project was scrapped, unfortunately. During the Communist Revolution, much of the Navy was destroyed or knocked out of action in, of course, the USSR, even with attempts afterwards to rescue some ships, such as the Borodino or the Ismail-class battlecruisers. Because of the unfortunate state of the Soviet Navy, large-scale shipbuilding programs were started to rebuild the Navy and make it a fighting force. But as history shows, any large-scale projects that started usually ended with failure and scrapping up the project entirely, or even attempting to make a carrier of it, which would also fail. This applies to the Stalingrad class, which was overall resented by the Navy and Ministry of Heavy Machinery in the later years of development, but only pushed forward by, of course, one Stalin himself, and with his death, the project also died with him. The roots of the Stalingrad class design specifications were sent out just before the outbreak of the Second World War, in May of 1941. The Navy wanted, well, obviously for the Soviets, the Navy wanted a ship that would work with the Kirov and Chapayev class cruisers, and alongside the Kronstadt class battlecruisers in defense of the Russian coastline. The official requirements sent out were as follows: engage and destroy enemy light cruisers armed with 203mm cannons, support Allied light cruisers, lay minefields, suppress enemy forces during landing operations, and conduct operations against enemy lines of communication. The Navy initially wanted a ship of 20,000 tons or smaller with the ability to withstand 203mm artillery from enemy cruisers armed with 203mm cannons and also 100mm cannons, 37mm automatic cannons, and a torpedo tube mount, with a speed of no less than 36 knots, with also a range of 10,000 nautical miles at 20 knots, as well as carry 4 seaplanes and 2 catapults. 3 designs were submitted, but only one that displaced 25,000 tons was able to checkmark every requirement. It was then suggested that the main armament of 203mm cannons be upgraded to 220mm cannons, and a larger AA armament with reductions to armor, speed, and range. Operation Barbarossa put this idea on hold as the World War II began for the Soviet Union. The project was then revived in 1943 with an additional requirement: protecting carrier groups and conducting operations with them. The weaponry was also changed slightly to 9 210mm or 230mm cannons, 12 130mm dual-purpose guns, and 32 37mm AA guns, with the dropping of the torpedo requirement. All of the other requirements stayed the same. With 12 proposals submitted, none of them were selected. And in 1944, a new set of requirements were sent out, requesting a ship with a more realistic 25,000 to 26,000 tons, where the maximum speed drops to 33 knots and a range of 8,000 nautical miles. The weaponry also received a revision: 9 220s, 16 130s, 32 45s, and 20 23mm AA guns. And in 1945, the 23mm would be replaced with 25s. Now, after the defeat of the German Reich in Europe, the Soviet Union turned back towards building and strengthening its navy, now that it had a much larger navy to contend with regarding the American and also Royal Navy from Britain. But with the uncertainty of the post-war building situation, the Navy did not want to begin detailed design work and an already overburdened design bureau, and also refused to even begin designing the vessel in its entirety. The Navy continued its current studies of cruisers and planned a 10-year construction program from 1946 to 1955, with 10 of the large cruisers included. This was based on defensive tactics of the Soviet Union against British and American carrier groups, with submarines attacking communication lines. The construction program would be reviewed in September of 1945, with no major disagreements arising. Although Stalin favored increasing the main weapon size to 305mm instead of 220, but did not push this when resisted. Due to disagreements with the shipbuilding commissariat, a compromise had to be made, as they said that no new ships of such a large size could be laid down until about 1950, and only wanted to continue with the designs they currently were building. The Navy saw no reason, with wartime peace, that no new ships could not be laid down until 1948, and this resulted in a special commission that ended in favor of the commissariat with modified designs that they had. Despite this, 4 large cruisers were to begin construction, 2 at Shipyard 402 in Molotovsk and 2 in Shipyard 444 in Nikolaev. And another 3 would also be laid down between 1953 and 55. The compromise would be approved in November 1945, with detailed design work starting in 1946 with both the 220mm and 305mm cannons. In August of 1947, the Navy and Shipbuilding Ministry narrowed down the proposal received to 3 designs, 2 separately designed by the other armed with 305mm cannons, and 1 jointly designed with 220s. The latter design was 2,000 tons lighter than the Navy's design, with a smaller belt thickness, but was overall the same design. The joint design was also 2,000 tons smaller and had a smaller secondary armament, but that made it 1.5 knots faster. All 3 had a range of 6,000 nautical miles at 18 knots, and Stalin would approve of the Navy's more armored design, but because of delays from the Tito-Stalin split and the Berlin Wall in June, they were not reviewed until August 1948. With the approval, the TSK B-17, which was the Heavy Design Bureau, they would start 4 designs, only differing in secondary armament placement and boiler layout, but overall incredibly similar. The Bureau favored 1 design, with the Navy and Shipbuilding Ministry agreeing on the design, allowing the Bureau to begin technical design with approval so that the ships could be laid down in the 3rd quarter of 1950 as planned. However, when Stalin reviewed the sketch, he rejected it and demanded a smaller, faster ship capable of 35 knots. The new revised design would be delivered to Stalin within a year, and surprising amount of time given the very involved process. What can be inferred is that the Design Bureau kept most of their work and deleted the 2 rearmost secondaries and their magazines, which made more room for larger turbines and more boilers, given from their 1949 design to the 1951 design. The Navy did not agree with the change to make the design 36,000 tons or the increase in the speed. In a meeting at the Kremlin in 1950, Stalin revealed several key points on his thoughts of the ships. When asked by Stalin the purpose of the Stalingrads, the admiral stated to fight heavy cruisers. Stalin stated that they must fight light cruisers, as he stated, "It is necessary to increase its speed to 35 knots and create a cruiser that will cause panic among the enemy light cruisers, disperse and destroy them." He also believed any combat they faced should be close to home. Since the American and British cruisers fight far from home, they would be out of touch with their home ports. He also ordered that the AA complements must be lowered, as the escorts the Stalingrads will have could deal with the aircraft, since any aircraft looking to engage the cruiser will be at 1,500 meters, to which he also stated that 130mm had the range far in excess of that altitude. This was approved by the Council of Ministers in March of 1950. The technical design would soon begin and be completed in December of 1950. Reviews done by the Navy and Shipbuilding Ministry would, however, make noticeable changes in April. The original bow was similar to the Chapayev's bow, but during sea trials of the Chapayev, it was discovered that this lowered her seakeeping ability, so the Stalingrad's bow was radically altered with a more raked stem. The shear and flare also gave the ship an additional 10 meters in length, and in addition, the belt armor was increased from 150 to 180 millimeters, thanks to weight savings elsewhere. The final design would be submitted in June 1951 for approval, but preparations for the working design drawings began before it was approved. The first sections of Stalingrad herself would be laid down at Slipway 0 at Marty South Shipyard in November of 1951, where the Sovietsky Soyuz-class battleship, the Sovetskaya Ukraina, was laid down in 1938. But the slipway was in need of reconstruction, and the lower end was occupied with the Sverdlov-class cruiser, the Mikhail Kutuzov, who was to be launched at the end of 1952. Moskva's keel was laid down in 1952, and the Baltic Works in Leningrad, and an unnamed third was laid down in Yard 402 in Molotovsk. Soviet sources split between Kronstadt and Arkhangelsk. A fourth ship was also ordered but never laid down, despite the extreme efforts of the Ministry of Shipbuilding. Parts, machinery, armor, steel, and other equipment arrived late and, unfortunately, out of sequence, which brought the Stalingrads about 6 months behind where they should have been, with Stalingrad supposed to be 42.9% complete, but actually being 18.8% complete, Moskva supposed to be 11.5%, but actually being at 7.5%, and the third ship supposed to be 5.2%, unfortunately at 2.5%. The orders for the Stalingrads were cancelled in April of 1953, about a month after Stalin's death, by the Ministry of Transport and Heavy Machinery. Moskva and the third ship were ordered scrapped, while Stalingrad, who was 70% ready for launching, was ordered to be a target hull for missile tests. Stalingrad was launched in April 1954, and her stem, which had been more or less completed, was scrapped, and her bow had never been started since any and all work was suspended earlier in that year. The central section of the ship that remained was modified for her new role. In May 1955, 3 tugboats began to move what was left of Stalingrad's hull to her final resting place. High winds caused the hull to drive ashore at the entrance of the Sevastopol port in a very rocky part of the port, only 50 meters from the shore. And the first attempt to dislodge her was an attempt with brute force from a Kirov class, the Molotov, and a war reparation ship in the Condottieri class, which of course is the Kerch, which we just got added. This failed, as did other conventional methods. Explosives were tried, but made the issue worse by flooding several compartments, and after these attempts, a much more in-depth assessment was commissioned that discovered 259 steel projections that helped cement Stalingrad in place, which also invalidated or invalided all previous data on the amount of force needed to dislodge her. The capsizing and destruction of the battleship Novorossiysk delayed things even further, as the battleship took higher priority. The Stalingrad's hull had to be patched, projections removed, and also had pontoons attached, pivoted into deeper water, raised, then towed back into port for more permanent repairs, which would have taken a significant amount of time. The next attempt to tow her away was more successful this time, and she was delivered to a naval fire range in between Yevpatoria and Sevastopol. where she would be hit by at least 7 P-1 Strelka anti-ship missiles fired from the Sverdlov class, the Admiral Nakimov. The missiles hit the upper and main deck and caused catastrophic damage, although it didn't sink her. There are reports of the P-15 Termit being fired at the Stalingrad and a large number of AP munitions. By the early 1960s, her usefulness as a target hulk had reached its end and she was scrapped, likely in 1962. So, as you can see, none of this ship was really built. You had a husk of a ship when it comes to its hull. Nothing else was built in it. If we're talking about the 305mm, the 9 turrets, technically 1 barrel was completed. That's it. So, yeah, if this actually gets added into the game, it would be a travesty and a mockery of the system when it comes to adding stuff which actually existed. This thing has as much reason to be in the game as something like the Panther II, which was removed for its ahistorical nature. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Professor X 1718, Orangetail, Sakoshi Tiger, BRFC 15, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe A, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, and then Kyle Kin, Barine, Lafouche, and also Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.